If you love hearing stories of real life answered prayers, this episode is for you. Listen in as Laura Kampmeyer shares with us a peek behind the scenes of a wife and mama of 7 children. She shares transparently her testimony of the faithfulness of God throughout her journey. Help me welcome my friend Laura Kampmeyer. She and I actually got to know each other because our daughters are friends, and she's the wife for 23 years now. She's been married to her husband, and they have 7 children. She's also a homeschool mama like me, so we have some fun things in common. Laura, I am excited to hear your story today, so I'm just going to let you just go ahead and start telling us about you.
Okay, yes, I'm very excited. Been thinking on this for a couple hours here. But yeah, my story, I guess, would be the faithfulness of God. Honestly, I was thinking about it last night as we talked, and God has been so faithful throughout my life, and He's really been the anchor for everything in my life through, raising children, marriage, things that come up in life. He really has been the anchor. And people will ask, with many children, and how do you do it? And I'm like, if I did not have God, I really don't know how I would do it, because as you know, as a mama, there's things that come up that you cannot do very well through your own strength, that without God, I really don't know. It'd be very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And he has been such an anchor. But so I've been in a Christian household my whole life, and raised and had a lot of friends and family that were Christian, but I really didn't probably give my life to Christ till I was probably 15 or so. So that's where really I was like, oh God, I knew of God and I was told of Him and the stories of God, but knowing Him personally, like He is real, and there's a presence, and it's not just this name and this word. You hear, you're like, wow, this is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my journey to Christ started. So I would say 15 or so. And it's just been amazing since, but He has helped me through so many, like your teen years are interesting, trying to navigate life. And I always felt like the odd man out because I am very artsy and a creative, but I always felt like I was a little bit of like an outsider as far as, I had lots of friends, but nobody I knew very close.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a blessing I look in disguise now, because I really leaned into my relationship with Christ. Because I remember thinking like, hey, I can talk to Him. I can tell Him like what I'm feeling. And at the time I was like, Lord, just give me a best friend, and best friends are amazing. But at the time I'm like, I realize now that it was such a blessing that I didn't have a super close friend, but that I leaned on Him. And I really grew roots so deeply then that now I realize I don't know where my life would be if I hadn't had that time to grow at such a young age.
Right.
In hindsight, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. God works sometimes when you're like, oh God, I need this, I need that. And He's like, hey, just hang on. I have a bigger, better plan for you. And I've always been very social. I like having people over and doing things. And I always wanted a big family. I always thought 5, and hey, I have 7 now. So, but I guess my testimony is there's so much. I was kind of thinking like, where do I begin? Because there's been so many times that He's just come through in ways that I cannot even explain. And, prayers that will be answered that I'm like, wow, God, you're so amazing. I remember we first had, well, it's probably like 2008 and 7, that was an interesting time financially. Had a bunch of kids and some needs. And I remember one point, in Florida, it doesn't get cold often, but when it's cold, you do need jackets and stuff like that. And I think I had like four or five kids that needed coats. And I was like, Lord, this needs to happen. They need to have coats. And I'm like, I know this is not a good time. Like financially, this is a huge expense and it seems almost a waste because you only wear it, a couple months of the, or maybe not even that. And it was just a quick prayer and I left and I did something else and I come home and there's a large garbage sack sitting by my garage. And I'm like, okay, hauled in by the door and I'm like, what on earth is this? And I open up and it's jackets. And
Wow.
I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. God, you're wonderful. And then, didn't get a chance to really look through it. And then I looked through it later and I'm like, it was every size that I needed.
Oh.
And I'm like, I didn't know who had done this, and I was just like, wow, that's amazing. Later I found it was a friend of mine that was like, hey, I'm going through stuff and I didn't have your number. So I just dropped it off. I'm like, you literally don't know. You like answered a prayer.
Hmm.
So there's so many tidbits like that, or people coming through my life that have just been such a blessing. But that was one I'm just like, God, you even see the small things. And that's what, as I've gotten older and I've just realized it more. I mean, it's always been there, but realized he cares about even the little things. You might think even as something personal, like, this is not a big deal. I'm not going to really say anything to God about it. I'm not going to pray, but he sees even the little things. And I always remind my kids of that. Like he sees the tears and he sees, and he cares, every little thing he does care. And I think with Christ, there's so much growing. You never can be done growing and learning, but faithfulness is something that always pops out to me of so many things. And it helps me to keep reaching out and say, God, there's so much more. And to showing people like he does care. He is faithful. He really is real. There's a presence you can feel from him. It's not just this thing on a page. It's not this cute little statue people make. It is a real thing. And he does care about every little thing in your life.
That's right.
But there's so many little stories. I remember another time that was the kind of same time frame. And it just blessed me so much. But I went to the grocery store to get some bread and I just popped a few things in my cart. That time there were so many blessings that people poured on us that did not even know that time frame really has stood out to me a lot because nobody likes asking for stuff. And there were so many needs at that time. So many people needed things. It wasn't just us, there's so many people that had needs that need to be met. But I remember this man I do not know walked in front of me and said, hey, I want to take care of her bread today. And I was like, oh my gosh, you have no idea how much that means to me. And he was just like, the Lord has blessed me so much. It's my job to pour into other people. And that's always stood out to me. I'm like, when I can, I want to do that, just whether it be actually financially or spiritually or just being a friend. There's so much to Christianity than just reading in church and different little things we always think of. Is just ministering to his people, whether it be taking time to talk to a friend, bring them dinner, or there's just so many things that is actually ministering that I've realized through the year. And trying to teach my kids, that's my job now. I'm like, okay, they're getting older, they're going to be leaving the nest, I want to train them to like be good citizens when they go about and represent him well. Not being surprised when somebody sees you, they're like, oh gosh, I never would have thought you were Christian. You want to be known as the caring kind. And they're like, okay, that makes sense. You're a Christian. Not like, oh my, I would never have guessed, but you're representing him so well that people want Christ. And because he is such an anchor, he really, really is. Through so many things, he can give you words that you don't know how to express.
Right.
But yeah, so yeah, he's truly my best friend. I will say that, because there's times that you really don't know how to express things to others. And my husband's so supportive. I appreciate him so much, because I definitely go on many ventures of dreams and ideas and excuse me. And he says, okay, give it a try. He's pretty good about I have all these ideas. One of my current crazy ideas, I'm beekeeping. So that was like kind of a journey.
And
he's
how's
like,
it going?
It's going well.
Good.
My first two bees kits, I guess, I don't know what you call them, that flew away. So that was a sad moment.
Oh,
But the last one I was able to purchase local, and they have hung around and they've been awesome. But that's one of my excuse me, um my dreams or visions. And I was like, hey, we should get bees. And he's like, okay.
oh
But
gosh.
I love it.
That's so
And,
fun. I love that.
currently I'm trying to garden. That's another thing that I feel like is, as I'm gardening, like that, there's so much to gardening and God that's connected, that
Yes.
like the amazingness of this rock hard tiny seed that, like, I recently planted carrots, well, the last couple of months, and it's just the tiniest, hardest seed that looks very insignificant. And yet there's so much in there if it
Mhm.
can be cultivated, correctly. And I'm like gardening, like some of it's gone well, and some of it's been terrible.
Yes.
But just being like, God is like, sees a person, in that manner, almost like, there's so much I can do with you. Just be, you let me.
That's right.
We'll put
Yeah.
up this hard shell and we're like, no, 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 we got this, God. And he's like, no, just let me in. I can do so much. There's so much in
Yes.
this seed. So yeah, it's been a learning curve for sure.
Yes. Oh, I remember so many lessons. I haven't gardened lately. We did though, like a little, like when the kids were younger and stuff. And I remember that same feeling, Laura, of so many lessons. Like I remember particularly there was one thing that always sticks out to me where we were out there and we were pulling out the little weeds. And I
Yeah.
remember telling them, think about this like little things that spring up in your heart, like little things. And if we kind of just stay on top of, dealing with any little issues or whatever, they don't grow and they don't, take root kind of, so to speak. And those little
Yes,
things that we weed out can help us to grow, grow in the way that we should, to honor
for
God.
sure. That's very true. Because I was just thinking of recently, I had a plant. Oh my goodness. Recently there's kind of suffering in my garden, and I was looking around and it's had weeds, like you're saying. And I was like, it's interesting how weeds, they'll suck life out of something.
Mhm.
And in your life, it can be the same. Like you'll have things you're kind of, sometimes that you need to get rid of something. And
Yes.
sometimes it's there without us really realizing. But it can actually drain you by having certain things in your life. And the same with like these weeds. I was like, they're really like destroying my plant because they're sucking nutrients and stuff.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that plant's suffering. So I was yanking them out. Um, and that's very, very true. Just being mindful of things. You're like, oh, I kind of need to change this, but it's kind of hard, or I don't
Yeah.
really want to. But it's kind of pulling um on you for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Well,
been a journey for sure.
journey, yeah, absolutely. Well, as you were sharing about telling your kids and the impression, because I know that's always been important to me as well, and most parents, especially. And I was going to say what thought came to me is a verse that's one of my favorite, Psalm 145, about how one generation will proclaim him to the next generation, and how, we know that what he does in our life, and when we turn around and share it with our kids, and it gets to be a faith builder for them, whenever we proclaim it like that to that next generation.
Yeah.
Whereas and this is true for anyone, like you sharing your story today, others that are going to hear that, it's, brings God glory, and it helps
Yes.
to share hope, which is, really a lot of what this whole podcast for me has been about, is using our voices, to share hope with others. And I was just going to say, do you have any verse that you feel like has been really important to you? And I know that might be hard to narrow down. I didn't give you
Yes.
but do you have anything that comes to mind that?
I have a lot. Like you said, it's hard to narrow down. One that I think for a while is a whole chapter. I think it was Psalms 23. That was
Mhm.
kind of, I actually had it written out for a while in my kitchen. So I was like, I'd go back and remember to read it. Let's see if I can pull it up. Um, but it's basically, I mean, most people know it, but there's so much to it. And we're talking about, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me into the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemy. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I mean,
Mm.
there's so many, but that one is just, there's so much in there.
Mhm. Yeah.
The Lord's your shepherd. You know, he leadeth you, and you shall not want. And I always thought when I was a kid, I remember thinking like, well, I want toys, you know. It's kind of dumb, you know, the way kids think is so funny sometimes. But I'm like, no, you want, like, he has your needs, he can have your needs met, you know, and he wants to lead you to the water. Like, he's not pulling you, so you got to go with him.
Right.
He's not going to just drag you down the stream, but he wants to lead you there.
Mhm.
And he restores your soul. I mean, there's times when your soul feels like kind of exhausted, or you're just like yearning for like something, and
Mhm.
he will restore it. And you can walk through you know, the valley of a shadow of death. Like, there can be times where you walk and it's like really trying,
Mhm.
but remember, he is there in that,
Yes.
and he's with you. And I always will read through, or says, and I will fear no evil. Cause like sometimes stuff will try to pop in your head, like, oh my gosh, what if this happens? Or there's that out there. Um, and not to let that be coming in as a root of
Right.
fear, and being like, no, you're the devil's author of fear. God is the opposite of the devil. And be, you know, he's in his rod and staff, they comfort you. And
Yes.
and preparing the table before me in the presence of my enemy. I mean, there's so much, sometimes, especially in the world today, it seems like the enemy's winning so much.
Mhm.
Yet I feel like there's actually so much going on for God and moving, that the enemy's trying to dampen and put, you know, cover on it, that making him seem like he's so big and wonderful, and God
Mhm.
is actually far superior to that.
Absolutely.
And remind yourself, no, God is setting a table in the presence of his enemies. You know, he's
Mhm.
got his people covered, and you need to proclaim, not hold back, and be loud, and a voice of God is hope, God is love. He
Exactly.
sees you. I think that's
Mhm.
so important right now. Like, people need to know he does see you, and
Yes.
he loves you, and he really has your best interest in mind.
Mhm.
Like, the enemy tries to lie and say, no, you're going through this because he doesn't care. He doesn't hear your prayers. And it's such a lie.
Right.
And he may answer them so differently than we think, and maybe not in like a split second,
Mhm.
but his way is definitely the best way.
Yes. I agree. That's a great message right there for all of us, just to be reminded that, it's not always um what we may expect the answer to be, but he does answer, and his way is, the better way for us always. I agree. And I love
For
what you said too about he's leading us. He's so gentle with us. He doesn't push and shove us, you know,
no,
and he leads us gently. And I love that thought too. Absolutely.
yeah. I mean, I always think it's interesting that you read through like the children of Israel, their journey, and I
Mhm.
actually didn't realize it. Um, for so long, that the journey they took was actually such a short journey that took them forever. And there's sometimes I wonder in life that we're on this journey called life, and God has this greater plan. And sometimes, oh, we go around the tree 4 times, and he's like, you could just go straight in front. And
Yes.
but he's same thing. He's not gonna like pull us. And then we go down, a dead end. And he's like,
Mhm.
there's a sign at the end that says dead end, but whatever. If you want to go down it, go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm still waiting at that sign, waiting for you to come back.
Yeah.
Um, and I think of that story, like I feel like everything in the Bible is written for us to learn from.
Oh, for
And
sure.
I don't want to take a 40-year journey that's like a month or a week, you know. Who wouldn't? Like, if anybody's been on a road trip, like, would you really want that road trip to last 40 years?
Oh my gosh.
Not me.
No.
Not
Yeah.
me.
Not at
But
all.
there's so many things I'm like, if I can just avoid some of these pitfalls that, like you say, I see a better plan, just listen, trust me.
Mhm.
Um, you can avoid so many pitfalls.
That's
And
true.
sometimes a decision you know is right is hard. In
Mhm.
your heart of hearts, you're like, I know this is the right way, but I don't really want to do it. Or people might wonder, and all of these second guesses that are not God. Like,
Mhm.
just taking time. And this is something I'm learning, is taking time to be quiet and still, and not having anything with me, devices. Honestly, sometimes not even like music or anything. Just I'll go outside. Nature is my happy place. I love being outside. But just going and just being like, God, what are you saying? It clears my head. And I'm sure that there's other people as well, that
Yeah.
just like, what are you saying? Because sometimes there's so many, especially the day we live in with technology, there's so many voices and opinions, and even people well-meaning will have so many opinions of what you should or shouldn't do. And being like, no, God, what do you say for us right now? And your path may look so different than, mine, but they can be both going the right way.
Right.
And that's okay. And that's, for me, begin time to be still and quiet and just listen. And it's, for me, it's different times. Like sometimes it's late at night because I got little ones, or sometimes it's super early. Sometimes in the middle afternoon they're playing. But I always, as best I can, try to do it as often as I can, because there's so much growth I've personally had from that time. And it's tricky. I mean, but there's so much noise in our world.
Yes.
That you have to be so intentional. Because I'll put my phone like way far away, because I'll go ping, ping, and it's going off. I'm like, just be quiet. I don't want to hear it right now. But you have to be so intentional. It's challenging for sure. But also, I feel like it's very important in the world we are in. There's so much noise and opinion that you kind of have to make intentional time to have quiet.
Yeah, it's true. Because even when it's quiet, it's the natural thought is, okay, well then let me listen to, because I listen to like the Bible on my phone. Okay, well, let me turn that on. I'll get a few more verses, or I'm usually on an Audible book or podcast even, here I am. So it's just the thing of, you're right, just taking that time to actually not try to be listening to something. In the world that we live in, it is harder and harder to find that and carve it out. But yet that is what he tells us to do, right?
Yeah, it is hard, because I feel I'm a very busy person. Like I actually love being busy, which is good because I have to be. But there's so many times I'm like, I'm trying to overachieve when I need to just be still, because I'll be like cleaning my bathroom. Like you said, I have a podcast on, and the kids have music on, and I'm like, it can just be this flurry of like activity, and it's nothing's wrong with it. It's all doing good things. But there's a time for just like setting aside, and it sometimes it's not very long, like a few minutes, but that is sometimes it's hard. And like sometimes you'll sit still to be quiet and just like read or just nothing, and my thoughts are like, oh, I should be doing this, or this, like all these thoughts are like, my mind's still busy even though I'm still and quiet, and my mind's going
I am with you. I get it. I'm like, okay, you got to make good use of this time. But in reality, making good use of that time is sometimes just that being still and being quiet and listening and letting it lead us, like you were saying earlier. And Laura, one thing we have in common is, being homeschool moms. And I think sometimes as homeschool moms, we take on a lot. And we expect a lot of ourselves and also of our kids. So can you just share a little bit about that with us?
Yes, I've thought of that often, because I'm definitely, for myself, give myself a lot of lists and things to do that I want to achieve. But at the same time, I can be so much pressure for a kid. Like we'll have these goals, and there's so many expectations for kids is in the world to, especially in education. You have to do this to be an achiever. You have to do this to, become a good citizen. You have to do this to become a business owner. And there's all these, and there's such a busyness of their mind and all this stuff of really overachieving. And some can be good, but it's also very exhausting. And I think letting your kids know that they are loved no matter what path they choose of education and different things like that, or work, choice of what job. I never wanted to burden them with even living a dream through them. I see that often in parents is like, oh, I always wanted to do gymnastics, so I'm gonna, like, my kids doing gymnastics and games and shows, and they got work, they go to school, and then boom, boom, boom. And some kids love it. They really thrive. And then some, I see that it's the parents living their dream through their child. And you see in the kids' eyes, like they don't want to disappoint their parent, but they're not really having fun, and it's really exhausting. And I'll see that. I'm like, please let me not be that parent, because I'll get excited about stuff my kids could care less about. And they may have a dream I don't know, and they're just wanting to please me and not really, do what their dream is. Maybe they're passionate artists and they have no idea of that lifestyle necessarily. but I'm wanting them to do sports,
Mhm. Yeah.
and they could care less about sports.
Mhm.
Or and there it's just in so many areas, it's just making sure that your desires for them are pure, like not
Right.
through your own, and realistic expectations. Like
Yes.
every kid has such a different way of learning, and as you know,
Mhm.
schooling and different things,
Yeah.
of keeping it realistic, not such pressure. I mean, as adults and as moms, I feel like there's so many pressures.
Yes.
Imagine for kids, there's likewise so many pressures that they
Mhm.
already have to deal with it. They don't need us just like do this, do this, do this, do
Mm.
this.
So true.
The way
Yeah.
you can there's a way you can encourage them and you can keep pushing them towards a positive thing without adding more pressure and
Mhm.
anxiety to their life for sure.
It kind of comes back to what you were saying earlier about how God leads us just to be that gentle leader in their life
Yes.
rather than like pushing, I guess. And
Yeah.
I've heard it said too sometime that unmet expectations can lead to resentment. And I'm sure that can be on both sides. So
I would
being
100% agree with
Mhm.
that.
being cautious that we don't put any unrealistic expectations on our kids or build up resentment in them, both ways, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
For
just again, like you said, it's just leaning into God and letting Him lead us as we lead them.
Yes, for sure.
So encouraging to hear your story and just to hear how God has been so faithful to you. And I love this conversation, Laura. It's been very, very it's been an honor to hear it. And before we close out, is there any little thing you would like to tell the listeners today as we leave?
Lean in, I would say lean into God, like whatever that takes. In my first, uh, honestly, 2020 was a little interesting time of just trying to figure things out in the world. But He put it upon my heart, take time to lean
Mm.
into me, and I will help you make the rest of things happen. Because, like, as a busy mom, like there's always things you need to do,
Yeah.
chores, work,
Yes.
and putting Him first, He'll make the stuff work out if you
Mhm.
do honor that. So I would say make sure you make time to spend with
Yeah.
God, and your kids will see that, and that actually will help them grow as well. And it doesn't have to be a certain amount of time. It can be 5 minutes, whatever. Take time
Yes.
for
Yes.
sure.
Well, I agree with you 100%. That is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's been an honor
Thank
to
you.
hear your story.
Thank you. It's so fun to talk with you.